What up, though? The Gullah, Rice, Slavery, and the Sierra Leone American Connection. Joseph A. Opala. The Black Seminoles are a small offshoot of the Gullah who escaped from the rice plantations in South Carolina and Georgia. The Spanish wanted to keep Florida as a dangerous wilderness frontier, so they offered a refuge to escaped slaves and renegade Indians from neighboring South Carolina and Georgia. The Gullahs were establishing their own settlements in the Florida wilderness by at least the late 1700s. They built separate villages of thatched roof houses surrounded by fields of corn and swamp rice. In the illustration on the screen, this is Abraham, a black Seminole, or properly a Seminole. He is a American. He is a Seminole, or at least that is what he's being called here. For lack of better terms, he's an American. We know there is no such thing as a black. And it says Black Seminoles, Gullahs who escaped from slavery. If you going to work in the AM, as a matter of fact, when you hear someone say, or when you read that someone, one of these historical figures, one of these historical American figures that are falsely termed as black or African American, when you hear that they are born into slavery, you born into slavery as well. Just know that. So they were operating within it just like you are. How well they operated in it? Well, how well you operate in it remains to be seen. There's a Seminole tribe today. You've heard of the 5 civilized tribes, the 5 companies, charters, corporations. There's a Seminole tribe in Florida today. But when you go and you visit the Seminole Reservation, 9 times out of 10, they will not look like this illustration right here. Because, see, Abraham, he's an American. He's an American Indian. He is being termed a black Seminole leader right here. There's no such thing as a black. And these broad designations or broad descriptions or labels put on people, what did he call himself? It says Abraham, a black Seminole leader in the Second Seminole War. The Indians called him Soanaf Tustanuki. Soanafe Tustanuki. Suanafe Tustanuki. A title indicating membership in the highest of the 3 ranks of war leaders. He is wearing typical Seminole dress and holding a rifle. If he's wearing typical Seminole dress, why is it so difficult for people to believe that He is the typical Seminole or typical American Indian. The Gullahs were establishing their own settlements in the Florida wilderness by at least the late 1700s. They built separate villages of thatched roof houses surrounded by fields of corn and swamp rice. Swamp rice that's always been there. No one came here by the millions to cultivate that swamp rice. That swamp rice wasn't brought from anywhere else to here. They recognized the settlers as their enemies. Yeah, those same settlers are here today. Work, work, work. Work, work, work until you die. Modern historians have called these free Gullah frontiersmen the Black Seminoles. Modern historians have called these free Gullah frontiersmen the Black Seminoles. Free. The words like free only, this only comes when someone uses someone calls you free, or the fact that free is even a discussion, lets you know that you are born into slavery. You think you not, for lack of a better term, a prisoner? These free Gullah frontiersmen, what else would they be? We come from the womb of a woman into a place. What else would we be? These free Gullah frontiersmen, the Black Seminoles. No such thing as a black. Did he call himself a Seminole? Or is this a description placed on Abraham and his people by someone else from somewhere else? General Jackson, later president, referred to this first Seminole War as an Indian and Negro War. Why would he refer to it as an Indian and Negro War? Because him, like a bunch of other people, want to keep that "and" in between Indian, the word Indian, and the word Negro, to make you think they're different, and they're not. It's just that there's a such thing as one, but the other one, there is no such thing as. It's make-believe. The Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, Negro. It's no such thing as a Negro. And as far as Indian, American Indian, we'll rock with that. But you personally, you should know what your people called themselves before any of these people came here and called you something that you not. What did your people call themselves? We know what they called you. The American Commander General Jessup informed the War Department that this, you may be assured, is a Negro and not an Indian war. They are one and the same. And a U.S. congressman of the period commented that these black fighters were contending against the whole military power of the United States. These black fighters, these American Indian fighters, these Americans, the only Americans it ever was, is, and will be, you know, the ones that are termed copper-colored races in the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. And later, they took off the copper and just called you colored. And it says, and a U.S. congressman of the period commented that these black fighters were contending against the whole military power of the United States. First, Jessup says, this, you may be assured, is a Negro and not an Indian war. Later, a U.S. congressman of the period commented that these black fighters, Negro, black, same thing, both the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, the Black Seminoles, or properly the Americans, exiled from their Florida strongholds in Oklahoma. And when I'm saying American, okay, if anyone's gonna call themselves American, it should be us. Like I said, the only Americans it ever was, is, and will be. So when I use these terms, just understand that what's more important is what your people called themselves and called you. The Black Seminoles are properly the Americans exiled from their Florida strongholds. In Oklahoma, the government put them under the authority of the Creek Indians, slave owners who tried to curb their freedom, and while slave traders came at night to kidnap their women and children. After emancipation of the slaves in the United States, the U.S. Cavalry in southern Texas invited some of the Black Seminoles, some of the American Indians, to return and join the army. And it officially established the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. After emancipation of the slaves in the United States, the U.S. Cavalry in southern Texas invited some of the Black Seminoles to return and join the army, and it officially established the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. Who would join that army? After emancipation of the slaves in the United States, the U.S. Cavalry in southern Texas invited them to return and join their military. And guess what? To this day, our people join their military, the same one that's subjugating you, the same one that has you in this predicament. To this day, our people join their military. And wear it as a badge of honor. In 1875, 3 of the Scouts won the Congressional Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration, or the United States' highest military decoration, in a single engagement with the Comanche Indians on the Pecos River. The Black Seminoles, or properly the American Indians, had fled the rice plantations, built their own free settlements in the Florida wilderness, and then fought almost continuously for 50 years. Now, don't get it fucked up. When it says these Americans, who they're calling Black Seminoles, had fled the rice plantations, built their own free settlements, they fled the rice plantations. They fled somewhere where they was being mistreated or someone was trying to handle them. Built their own free settlements. What else would they do? What else would they build besides they own houses? Besides putting together the things that they needed? Besides doing for themselves? Built their own free settlements. That's a romantic way for saying they was taking care of themselves and they people in the Florida wilderness. Well, this all was a wilderness. And then fought almost continuously for 50 years to preserve their freedom. Fought continuously to preserve their freedom. Fought people continuously to just be. to be able to live. For people not to mess with them. For them to be left alone. Why is it so hard for these people to leave people alone? They can't do it. The Anglo-Saxon can't do it. The Democrat Republican Federalist Anglo-Saxon Christian can't do it. Can he? Can she? And then fought almost continuously for 50 years to preserve their freedom. It is little wonder they should provide some of the finest soldiers in the U.S. cavalry. You can't beat them, join them, right? Or you can't beat them, invite them. In 1978, Dr. Ian Hancock discovered that elders among the Texas Scouts still speak a dialect of Gullah, just like you still speak a dialect of your people's language, of American. Go to Alabama, they speak American. Go to California, they speak American. The Americans speak American. Go to Mississippi, the Americans speak American. They speak dialects of American. 140 years after their ancestors were exiled from Florida, as much as 200 years after their early ancestors escaped from rice plantations in South Carolina and Georgia, in 1980, this writer found that elderly people among the Oklahoma Seminole freedmen, first they were black Seminole. Hold on, man. Let's get to it. First, they were black Seminoles. Okay, now it's Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. They're Negroes. They're emancipation of the slave. Then it says in 1980, these writers found that elderly people among the Oklahoma Seminole freedmen, they call you what they want to call you. You answer to it. What were you before anyone start calling you stuff? Also speak Gullah, while many younger people remember words and phrases once used by their grandparents. Chicago Tribune, Chicago, Illinois, Saturday, September 9th, 1875. Saturday, September 9th, 1875, the Chicago Tribune newspaper. While I stood by the side of the expiring brave, pondering over the harsh usages of war and the cruel fate that seemed to pursue the American Aborigines, with fierce and unrelenting steps, the door behind was rudely pushed open. While I stood by the side of the expiring brave, pondering over the harsh usages of war and the cruel fate that seemed to pursue the American Aborigines. You know, the people who sprouted from the soil in America. With fierce and unrelenting steps, the door behind was rudely pushed open, and a figure stood before me, which enchained my close attention. An Indian chief. Okay. In his war dress, or his outfit, a black plume floating gracefully above one of the most beautiful and striking countenances I had ever beheld, drew himself up before the dying warrior, and folding his arms across his breast with indescribable grace and dignity, he gazed upward with an expression of mingled grief and hatred. This was Osceola, the head and heart of the Seminoles. Okay. So if we go back to the top, we see that seemed to pursue the American Aborigines, and then an Indian chief, and then Osceola, head and heart of the Seminoles, American Indians, American Aborigines. This is who they're speaking of. And he says, a black plume floating gracefully over one of the most beautiful and striking countenance I had ever beheld. Whoever's telling this story, a man, no doubt, is saying that homie who came in, he said he had one of the most beautiful and striking countenances I have ever beheld. So he likes them. This is how they speak of you and your people. Okay, they always got you under a microscope and they think you're beautiful and striking. And they always dissecting you. So we got American Aborigines, Indian chief, Osceola, head and heart of the Seminoles. Remember the Seminoles? Abraham on your screen. A sketching, a black Seminole leader in the Second Seminole War. The Indians, or the American Aborigines, the Americans, called him Sunafe Tustanuki. Okay. And the name of that is Black Seminoles. No such thing as black. The Americans, Gullahs. Let's say Gullahs who escaped from slavery. None of us escaped. We in it. Thus, he stood for some minutes, and as the faint breathing of the dying brave ceased, brave. Atlanta Braves, perhaps? Dying brave ceased at last, and we talking about Georgia, South Carolina, Florida. We talking about that area, okay? And thus he stood for some minutes, and as the faint breathing of the dying brave, Atlanta Brave, happened to be in the city with a whole bunch of people. That's your people. Mine too. Ceased at last, he turned to one of the government inspectors and told him to report to Colonel Fanning the fact that the unhealthy air of the prison was decimating his tribe day by day, and to ask for them greater liberty and more nutritious food. Greater liberty and more nutritious food. This celebrated chief was not really a Seminole, but a Creek. Call him what you want to call him. Who told him what he was? Did he tell him? Did he specifically tell him? I ain't a Seminole. I'm a Creek. Probably not, because I'm pretty sure both of those names was put on him. You think he chose Seminole? Did he choose Seminole? Did he choose Creek? They called a bunch of our people Creeks. And his Castilian features and complexion gave rise to some romantic stories that he was a love child, the issue of a Creek chieftain's amour with one of the old and wealthy Spanish ladies of St. Augustine. Remember what they just said. Gave rise to some romantic stories. Stories about the moon and the stars and shit. His refined manner and bearing gave to the report a semblance of truth. Oh, because of his manner, because of his refined manner and bearing, because he acted a certain way, made them think the story was true. Oh, he act like us. He one of us. Yeah, we act like this. He act like us. So he one of us. We claim him. His refined manner and bearing gave to the report a semblance of truth at any rate. He certainly was one of the most complete specimens of perfect manly form and beauty that I ever saw. And again, this is a male. This is a man writing this article. It is not a woman writing this article. This is a man. The man seemed like he wanted to date him. If it wasn't such a bad situation, the man seemed like he want to ask him to go out with him. He want to take him out. He certainly was one of the most complete specimens of perfect manly form and beauty that I ever saw. About 5 feet 11 inches in stature, he was as straight as an arrow with a face of remarkable beauty. His face of remarkable beauty, like he's speaking of his woman. His hands were small and exquisitely formed. What did that say to you? What did that say to you that his hands were small and exquisitely formed? Damn, I mean, did he have 5 fingers, 4 fingers and a thumb? Divisions between each finger? We got hands. We know how hands formed, but his was exquisitely formed. His limbs of faultless mold, his movements grace personified, and his unstudied attitude classic in the highest degree. Sheesh. This punk is in love. Maybe we should leave. Maybe we should leave the room. Maybe we should give him some time by ourselves. Maybe he needs some time to himself. Shortly after this prison scene, we took on board the steamer all the captive Indians, with about 200 women and children, to transport them to Fort Moultrie on Sullivan's Island in Charleston Harbor. Shortly after this prison scene, we took on board the steamer all the captive Indians, with about 200 women and children. The same 200 women and children to this day. Their people, which is you, still under the force of the same people that took them, to transport them to Fort Moultrie on Sullivan's Island in Charleston Harbor. And during that trip, I had abundant opportunities of studying the character of our tawny guest. Tawny, light skin. Let me describe them in detail. First in rank, though, very undeservedly so, was Micanopy, called the war chief, though that title really belonged to Osceola. Mick was a short, fat, jolly-looking and feeling fellow, and at our cabin table, to which the chiefs were made welcome, he sat on the right hand of the head of the table. He was very loquacious, and through his interpreter, he gave us to understand that he was doing a land office business at the time of his capture, selling the Negro slaves and the horses he had stole from the Florida plantation. The sly old rascal would sip alternately from the glasses ale, porter, champagne, and then loudly call to Ben, his interpreter, and the most villainous looking Negro I ever saw, for a glass of whiskey. Mick was a short, fat, jolly looking and feeling fellow, and at our cabin table to which the chiefs were made welcome, he sat on the right hand of the head of the table. He was very loquacious, and through his interpreter, he gave us to understand that he was doing a land office business at the time of his capture, selling the Negro slaves. The sly old rascal would sip alternately from the glasses ale, porter, champagne, and then loudly call to Ben, his interpreter, and the most villainous looking Negro I have ever seen, for a glass of wiki or whiskey. Okay. So this is what they term today as black on black crime, right? Next to him sat the renowned Osceola, partaking sparingly of the meats, adjourning entirely the wines, abjuring entirely the wines and liquors, and seeming only to relish the cracked corn and milk prepared by his wives in the steerage, and sent to his place at the cabin table. Kohajo, this old chief won my highest regard and esteem far more than any other of the crowd, nor do I think that among all the red men I have ever seen, nor do I think that among all the red men I have seen, I have yet beheld his peer. See, we're talking about words and phrases that are being used synonymously. Negro, red men, Indian, American Aborigines, Seminole, blacks, Gullah. These words are being used synonymously. Far more than any other of the crowd. See, you thinking fire engine red. You thinking clown nose red. Or are you? Among all the red men I have seen, I have yet beheld his peer. He was truly one of nature's noble men, tall, symmetrical, with a countenance which the old masters would have given worlds to transfer to their canvas. He was a model of a man and a gentleman. Wildcat or Kokuchi. Wildcat. I think I heard somebody say that some people from the place that is termed Africa called Americans, so-called the people who you term as blacks and African Americans, that they called them, what's the word they called them? Akata or something like that. And someone said that it meant wildcat. I saw a video of a rapper from that place that is termed Africa. I forgot which specific place he was from, but he had a song, "Stay Away from the Akata" or something like that. And I mean, he sounded like the average, uh, for lack of a better term, drill rapper here. But they mentioned that Akata, and they mentioned it mean wildcat. So here we go. Wildcat or Kokuchi, Koakuchi, was one of the most desperate of the young warriors, and he escaped from his captor several times during the war. His flirting, his flitting from the St. Augustine fort displayed consummate skill and bravery. and he was seen in the very next action fighting like a tiger in the van of his tribe. On reaching Charleston, the chiefs were escorted to the theater, and the notice that they would be present filled the house to overflowing. The warriors seemed delightful at the interest and admiration of the Charleston belles. Of Indian this is Catlin's Gallery of Indian Portraits was on exhibition when I reached New York, and on visiting it, I gave him my Indian trophies procured from the Seminole chiefs, for which he was duly grateful. I urged him to add the finest looking Indian I had ever seen to his collection, and on my advice he hurried to Charleston, or Fort Moultrie rather, and barely succeeded in finishing his portrait of Osceola when that wonderful man expired, cursing, I doubt not, with his latest breath, the white race for all the wrongs his red brethren had suffered at their hands. Most of the army officers condemned his treacherous capture, and even Colonel Fanning, who had lost his left arm at the Bloody Dades massacre, denounced the employment of the flag of truce by Hernandez. That was from Captain Sam. The Omaha Guide, Omaha, Nebraska, Saturday, April 21st, 1945. The Omaha Guide newspaper, Omaha, Nebraska. Is this the illest nigga in Omaha, in Nebraska? Is this the illest nigga in Nebraska? Saturday, April 21st, 1945. In 1750, they welcomed into their country the Seminole Indians who had seceded from the Creek tribe of Georgia and Alabama. And you know who in Georgia and Alabama. But more importantly, know that because you know who you are and where you from, just know that you're operating for lack of a better term, as a slave. Yes, you were born into it. So don't mistake knowing who you are and knowing that criminals have bombarded you, have came in waves and stayed. Those criminals have force, and they've built the force. And some of your people are a part of that force. Let's shake it. In 1750, they welcomed into their country the Seminole Indians who had seceded from the Creek tribe of Georgia and Alabama. In fact, the name Seminole is simply the Creek word for runaway. So the word Seminole is simply the Creek word for runaway. So let me ask you a question. If the word Seminole or the designation Seminole and Creek are both make-believe, then is the definition that a make-believe gave to another make-believe, is the definition then make-believe? Negroes and Indians have always been allies in the great liberation struggles of the Western Hemisphere. Negroes and Indians. So Negroes, blacks, right? No such thing as a black. So we can get rid of that. That cancels itself out. So Indians have always been in the great liberation struggles of the Western Hemisphere. These now it's a dash in between Negro, Indian, making them one. Okay, I didn't know that was coming. Instead of Negroes and Indians, now it's these Negro Indian runaways on the Swanee, like each other from the start, and presently began to intermarrying, so that even today there is no Seminole in Florida or Oklahoma without admixture of Negro blood. Again, we have Seminole here, a designation that was probably put on some people, what them people call themselves, okay? We don't know what they called themselves unless they told us. If they told us, let me know where one of them said, "This is what I am." And then check it out. So let's take it for what it is, that it is a Seminole. Let's say a Seminole, which is an American Indian by a different name in Florida, Oklahoma, without admixture of Negro blood. No such thing as a Negro. So the Seminole, there is no Seminole in Florida or Oklahoma without admixture of American Indian blood. So the Seminole is an American Indian. He's an American, right? Stuff is made to confuse you. And when I read these old newspaper articles, just understand it is propaganda and they are newspapers. Are they as politically correct and blatant liars like they are today? I don't know about the politically correct part so much, but the lying is historical. The Omaha Guide newspaper, Saturday, April 21st, 1945. What did we just go over? We went over the fact that these Negro Indian runaways, or properly American Indians, on the Swanee. Now we go to Swanee Republic by Harold Priest. This is also the Omaha Guide newspaper, Omaha, Nebraska, Saturday, April 21st, 1945. Swanee Republic by Harold Priest. Every colored school kid, we're talking copper colored races of America, which are the Aborigines of America, the American Indians, the only Americans it ever was, is, and will be. Every colored school kid has been taught that old ditty written by Stephen Collins Foster entitled Swanee River. No, we wasn't taught that. And glorifying slavery. You think from that song that the Swanee country was a place where slavery was very heaven, a lost Jerusalem for emancipated exiles longing to return to their dear old massa, and the heavenly dish known as hoe cakes or cornbread, or what they cornbread muffins or something like that, just cornbread, you know, cornmeal, cornbread. That song is a lie. The great song or the great book telling of the Negro so-called exiles, now they're Negroes, who built with their Seminole Indian neighbors. They separate them again, as you can see. We know they're all one Americans. Neighbors, a republic of peaceful farmers and magnificent fighters on the banks of the Suwannee remains to be written. But someday, a Negro America ever more conscious, a Negro America, or America properly, ever more conscious of its great heritage of democracy, will learn proudly of the inspired black statesman. Here we go. The learning never stops. Here we go, man. The confusion. No such thing as a black inspired statesman of the fallen Swanee Republic of the great Negro chief Abraham, who was the stature of Frederick Douglass, of the scholarly Louis Pacheco, the runaway slave who read, wrote, and spoke French, Spanish, English, and Seminole, of their Indian friend, Chief Wildcat, who refused to be parted from his Negro brothers, but who escaped with them to Mexico after they had been removed with the Seminoles to Oklahoma. The wife of the great Seminole chief, Osceola, beautiful Negro Indian girl, or properly beautiful American Indian girl, was kidnapped and sold into slavery when her kidnapped and sold into slavery, because this is how a lot of what happened to a lot of people. They were kidnapped. Okay. Period. And sold into slavery when her husband and other chiefs were conferring with United States authorities under a flag of truce. Villages of the exiles were invaded, homes and crops burnt, women violated. I say violated in place of this word raped, and children carried off into captivity, first by soldiers of Georgia and soldiers who lived in the place that is termed Georgia, and later by soldiers of the United States in what historians politely called the Seminole Wars. All these people have brought here has been death. That's it. No contributions. Tell it. Say what you want to say. This has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with anger or anything of that sort. This is well documented. All the Anglo-Saxon, all they've brought here is war, is death, destruction, and some other stuff that I won't say here because I would like to think that a child could watch my show. And the things that I'm saying, it would be appropriate even for a child. The exiles and the Seminoles wished only to be left alone. Of course, a child that is with his parents or her parents or some adult in their families, one of their peoples or a group of their peoples, all listening and watching together. The exiles and the Seminoles wished only to be left alone by their... See? The exiles and the Seminoles, the Americans, wished only to be left alone by their new neighbor, the United States. See? The United States was their new neighbor. The United States was not the people who sprouted from this soil. It is foreigners. These are foreigners. These are people who immigrated here. Yeah, they came here and they said, I'm staying forever. And it is another lie that the so-called Seminole Wars were precipitated by Indian Negro raids. See? Indian Negro raids across the border of this country. They were not left alone and naturally sided with the British in the War of 1812. With the help of the British, they built a citadel, later to be known as the Negro Fort, on Apalachicola Bay, and then concentrated their settlements in a radius of 60 miles of the fort in order that their wives and families might be protected. The barbarous Colonel Clinch of the United States Army marched into their country and had the fort shelled by gunboats. Of the 334 people in the fort, 270 were blown to death and 61 wounded, and only 3 were not injured. Many of the wounded were then turned over to the Creeks, who still claimed jurisdiction over the Seminoles for torture. But it was not until, many of the wounded were then turned over to the Creeks, who still claimed jurisdiction over the Seminoles for torture. But it was not until 1843 that the Dixie slave owners could say that they had finally destroyed the Swanee Republic. By that time, pressure from slaveholders in Congress had forced Spain to sell Florida to the United States, and the Seminoles, who had always refused to make treaties which did not include their Negro brethren or their families, were transported with many of the Negroes to what is now Oklahoma. They say who was taken to Oklahoma was the Indians, right? The Indians, right? By the time pressure from slaveholders in Congress had forced to slaveholders, and when we say slaveholders, we're talking about company owners. We're talking about company runners. We're talking about bosses, right? Boss, managers, CEOs, right? Use some merch and put CEO on the front and slaveholder on the back. And Congress had forced Spain to sell Florida to the United States, and the Seminoles, who had always refused to make treaties which did not include their Negro brethren, were transported with many of the Negroes to what is now Oklahoma. Many of the Negroes or Negro Indians or American Indians or Seminoles or American Aborigines to what is now Oklahoma. The Wetumpka Herald, Wetumpka, Alabama, Thursday, July 27th, 1961. The Wetumpka Herald newspaper, Thursday, July 27th, 1961. Famous Indian Osceola was native of Alabama, by Billy Thomas. Famous Indian Osceola was native of Alabama, and we all know the people of Alabama. A large amount of my people, well, I mean, I should say Alabama is also my homeland as well. Your bloodline or the branches of your tree go in different directions, and a huge portion of my people come from Alabama. Almost everyone is familiar to some extent with the tragic life and death of the famous Indian Osceola, but few are aware of the fact that he was a native son of Alabama. Osceola was born about 1803 in what is now Macon County, Tuskegee. Fort Davis, Macon County, Tuskegee. Cotton Valley. A lot of my people was there. One of my great grandmothers was born in Tuskegee, and a lot of her brothers and sisters was also born in Tuskegee. Osceola was born about 1803, and I know who them people are. That blood run through my veins. Osceola was born about 1803 in what is now Macon County, near the western, where the western of Alabama Railway crosses Euphorby Creek. Euphorby Creek is Euphorby Creek. So a creek. This the name of a creek. So it's a lot of creeks in Alabama. And guess what happened? Because there's a lot of creeks in Alabama, and there was a lot of niggas living next to them creeks. They named them creeks. People ain't call themselves no creeks. Come on, man. That don't even make sense. Call yourself what somebody else called the body of water. A creek? Come on, man. In fact, the railroad passes within a few feet of his birthplace. He was a nephew of the noted Red Stick leader Peter McQueen and the son of the half-breed woman Polly McQueen. General Thomas S. Woodward knew Osceola as Billy Powell. Billy Powell. It is not clear whether his father was named Powell or that Osceola took the name after his mother married a man named Powell. Listen, it is not clear whether his father was named Powell. The end, right? Okay, that's the end of it. This is all make believe right here, the next part. Or that Osceola took the name after his mother married a man named Powell. That's the make believe. We don't know. They don't know. So why do they give you the make believe? To confuse you. It registers with you. It gets recorded in your mind, in your brain. Whether you use it or not, I don't know. There are several renderings of the name Osceola. Osceola, 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 as he holler, as he holler, as he holler, which would properly be, I see your hola. I see your hola. I see meaning leaves, referring to the leaves of the Yupon. And Kahola meaning singer or holler. I see you holler. Holler. I'll holler at you later, man. Holler at me, Joe. Combining the two would mean singer at the Black Drink, the Black Warrior River, perhaps. This would follow the Creek custom of making their traditional black drink from the leaves of the Yupon. Maybe. Osceola was about 12 years old when his people fled to Florida immediately after the defeat of the Red Sticks at Horseshoe Bend. His family united with the Miccosukee Seminoles, and when he first came to notice, he was without rank or property. He was best known at first for his outstanding athletic ability. Osceola was acknowledged the best ball player. He played ball. He was a hooper, right? Was they talking about hooping? Osceola was acknowledged the best ball player and hunter among the Indians of that region. He was expert at running, wrestling, and all forms of active exercises. His mind was as active as his body. In physique, Osceola was described as tall, slender, and straight with a pleasing countenance, though with a melancholy cast. His Caucasian strain was noticeable in his light complexion and features. Yeah, because everybody light-skinned is Caucasian, right? People would actually have you believe this. Like when people say mulatto. You know, I've heard mulatto comes from mule. Mulatto is a Anglo-Saxon and a nigger, or a nigger and Anglo-Saxon mix and match with the female and the male and all this other kind of stuff. And mulatto is this and mulatto is that. It's clear to me that these people call you what they want to call you. It don't even matter. If you lemon meringue, French vanilla, red bone, if you light skin, or a beige baby, if you light skin with a little pointy nose and some little bitty lips, you gonna be considered something different than if you light skin with a wide nose and some thick lips. They gonna call you something different. They gonna call you two different things. It's clear that they base everything, and they just said it. Countenance is everything with these people. Submission, submissive, being kind, being laid back, complexion, bone structure, the way you walk, talk, act. This is what the labels are based on. His Caucasian strain was noticeable in his light complexion. Again, This is listen. They not smart, man. They might be cunning, um, strategic, planners, lovers of death, vampire, criminal, demons, but not as smart as you think. His Caucasian strain was noticeable in his light complexion and features. Osceola's wife's name was Chichota. Chichota. Understand, Osceola, they say his name was Billy Powell. We not hearing from Osceola. We not hearing from Billy Powell. We're not hearing from his wife, Chichota. We don't know. And if they spoke with these people, we don't have a source here. We don't have a firsthand account here of a person who spoke with him or her and her. And even if they spoke with them, they spoke American. They told them their name was something. The person who was listening interpreted it a certain way and they wrote it a certain way. Look how they wrote her name. Chi Cho Ta. Why they put the dashes in there like that? Chi Cho Ta. Why they do that? Chichota? Why they couldn't just do it like that? It's like putting a dash between the S in Osceola and after the E in Osceola and saying O-C-Ola. Come on, man. This stuff is just playing with people, man. Which was Muskogee for the morning dew. Osceola was not a chief by descent, but through his abilities as a warrior and as a commander, he became recognized as a leader of the Seminoles in their fight against removal. He employed the classic Indian battle tactics with the greatest of success. He hid the women and children in the deep Florida swamps while he led the Indians in a series of harassing fights against the American army. No, against the United States Army. If we talking about America, we talking about the soil, right? Remember the American Aborigine and or the American Indian or the Indians or the Indians. And now we're talking about Osceola hid his family doing what he got to do against the American army, like the American Aborigines, the other American Indians, like they formed an army to do all this stuff to they people who was already here. No, we talking foreigners here. Yeah, some of your people was involved. They involved today. They helped today, right? Can they really make a difference? Can they really do anything? Are they really calling shots? His manner of warfare baffled the Americans, baffled the United States citizens or the foreigners. And he and his warriors were as elusive as because they talking about foreigners. His manner of warfare baffled the Americans. They stole the name Americans. They identity theft the name America. Period. It tells you in the 1828 Webster's Dictionary definition of American. It tells you they committed identity theft because now it's applied to the descendants of Europeans. But first, it was applied to the Aborigines or copper colored races. And I don't even really like even saying the copper colored races no more, because we acting like the people in our family are not different complexions. The people in my family is different, get different complexions. Everybody's not copper colored. That's just them calling us what they want to call us again, man. And you know these was foreigners, because it said his manner of warfare baffled the Americans. His manner of warfare wouldn't baffle other Indians or other Americans, baffled the foreigners. And he and his warriors were as elusive as the will-o'-the-wisp. One after another of the American officers, of the foreign officers, were charged with the responsibility of defeating the Indians, but all of them met dismal failure in the swampy wilderness of interior Florida. And you know who the people is of Florida. The original, the Aborigine, the Americans of Florida. You know who they are. At last, you know who they are. Look at them today. At last, the public, and I'm not talking about the people, I'm not talking about the old peoples or the Anglo-Saxons, as I say, old peoples. I'm not talking about the ones that go there and retire. At last, the public outcry for decisive action grew so great that the Americans or the foreigners had to stoop to subterfuge to capture Osceola. Under a flag of truce and under the most dishonorable of conditions, Osceola was arrested and carried away to Fort Moultrie, South Carolina, under the flag of truce. He went for that? Don't seem like he would go for that. Don't seem like he would go for that. However, a person do get tired of fighting, right? Because you're not only thinking about yourself, you're thinking about your family. So for him to go for that flag of truce or whatever, that truce, that flag, that truce, surrender type, whatever. He could have been thinking of his people, There he languished, his spirit broken by his imprisonment. They put him in a box. And by the way he was betrayed. He was betrayed. This is the first I'm hearing of betrayal. Was the betrayal the foreigners? Because I'm pretty sure he expected that type of behavior from them. Under a flag of truce and under the most dishonorable of conditions, Osceola was arrested and carried away to Fort Moultrie, South Carolina. There he languished, his spirit broken by his imprisonment and by the way he was betrayed. He was attended until he died by Dr. Hamilton M. Whedon, an army physician from Eufaula. No doubt put him under a microscope and no doubt analyzing his every move, poking and prodding, dissecting him. Shortly before his death, the celebrated artist George Catlin began a portrait of Osceola. They diabolical, man. This is super serious stuff, man. He got his family. He moving his people around, man, trying to keep them from being popped off by these foreigners, man, by these demons, man. And yet they got him, and they got a celebrated artist, George Catlin, painting a portrait of him. And let me just ask you a question. They got him in a box. They got Billy Powell in a box, right? Billy Powell from Alabama, man. They got him he from Tuskegee, man. They got him in a box in South Carolina. George Catlin is painting him. He's the famed, celebrated artist, George Catlin, right? Do you think Do you think George Catlin is gonna paint a picture, a true get how close too realistic do you think that illustration is going to be that George Catlin, celebrated artist, while painting Osceola, while he's in a box after they just lied to him and he done went through everything he done went through? How true do you think this illustration is going to be of him? Do you think George Catlin got some handlers? You think check it out. Osceola was attended until he died by Dr. Hamilton M. Whedon, an army physician from Eufaula. There to make sure his death is uninterrupted. Okay, for sure, and encouraged. And so the army letting George Catlin in there, and you think they don't have no requirements of him? But the great fighter expired before the painting was finished. Catlin said of Osceola, a most extraordinary man and one entitled to a better fate. M. Cohen, who knew Osceola, said, when conversing on topics agreeable to him, his countenance manifests more of the disposition of the white man than of the red man. There is great vivacity in the play of his features, and when excited, his face is lighted up by 1,000 fires of passion, animation, and energy. His nose is Grecian at the base, and it would be perfectly Phildian, but that it becomes slightly arched. There is indomitable firmness and withering scorn in the expression of his mouth, though the lips are tremulous from intense emotions which seem ever to be boiling up within him. About his brow, care and thought and toil have traced their channels, anticipating on a youthful face the work of time. It almost seems like this person, maybe it almost seems like George Catlin was given M. Cohen's description of Osceola in order to paint him or draw him. So here we go. This is George Catlin's rendition. This is the Osceola that George Catlin, that the army wanted us to see. This is Billy Powell on the screen right now. Right now. This is Billy Powell. This is supposed to be Billy Powell from Macon County, Alabama. Born about 1803. From Macon County, Alabama, Billy Powell, Osceola, had people with him. They say had people with him such as a nigga named Wildcat. Okay? And other nigga Indians. And this Billy Powell. This is Billy Powell from Macon County, Alabama. Right here. Here we go. Listen, man. If this don't look like a British mum, this is a British mum. This is a British mum. Ready for high tea. This is a British mom ready for for tea time. Yes? Tea and biscuits. Tea and biscuits. And beans. Tea, biscuits, and beans. And brats. Tea, biscuits, beans, and brats. This is an English mum. And here we have the Florida State mascot, Osceola. This is the Florida State mascot, Osceola. And here it is very clear. This is what I called old peoples, or you, as you might term this, a white man. This is a Caucasian and Anglo-Saxon with some paint on his face, some Party City paint, a Party City costume, and the ever-present, long, straight hair that you can find on any retriever. This is supposed to be Osceola. This is supposed to be Billy Powell. This is the mascot. They want to make the mascot close to what the mascot represents. They want to make it as close as possible to what the mascot is supposed to be representing, which is Billy Powell. We ain't gonna settle for none but all the way. Do the right thing.